All right, welcome back, everyone. This is Beneath the Helmet, Season 3. We got a very special episode today, talking about something that's very passionate in my world is leadership, but not necessarily just leadership. It's more specifically character-based leadership. So I'm your host, Arjuna George, former fire chief turned coach, educator, author, and now podcaster. Today, I'm joined with James Rychard, who kicked off episode 1, actually, of this awesome podcast. And he also joined back on episode 66 as well. We have Robert Avsec, who also joined us in episode 48. We got Anthony Correia, and finally, Scott Wilkinson. So welcome to the show, everyone. It's great to have this great kind of community talking about character-based leadership.
It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired fire chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
So I'm going to start off with just a little bit about a little nugget from each one of you. So I'm going to start with James, since he's the one who originated this whole conversation. Tell us a little nugget, just a little gem that maybe the world doesn't know about Jamie Rychard.
Wow. Let's see. I think I've probably the biggest thing for me is really a fascination with the show Mayday and bringing human factors and human performance into the fire service. I think for me, it's really about how can we improve decision making, and by analyzing and taking a look at aircraft accidents and investigations, I believe we can actually improve it.
Love it. Yeah, that's very intriguing stuff, and I know you're definitely a student of that for sure. Yeah. Tony.
So I'm here because the Fire and Emergency Services has passed down a lot of information and things that are facts that are really folklore. So my goal has been in the last 15 or 20 years to tie it with reality and what really is fact, and how we can move the fire service and EMS services forward through leadership and in general, just better human relations.
Love that. Better human relations, top notch. Chief Wilkinson, how about yourself?
Good morning. Well, I just like to, I think off the side, it's as you said at the start of June, it's the character versus leadership piece. I've been fascinated for years, and we hear lots about leadership, but my passion is about the character aspects of leadership, because, you know, we can train people, we can do all sorts of things, but we can't train character as well as we can train skills. So it's a real passion, and my low bar setting for our staff really is just to come out and tell everybody, just be nice. So the old adage.
The old Alan Brunacini.
The old Alan Brunacini.
Yes, love it. I use that on a daily basis almost, that those two words. So Robert, finally, welcome.
Welcome. Oh yeah. Robert Avsec, one owner, low mileage, well traveled, however. I think that I kind of tie in with Jamie with the operational aspects of psychology, but I'm really committed to the Fire Service Psychology Association. I think there's an awful lot that the fire service is missing, from assessments to industrial and organizational psychology, and operations, that as Scott said, we can train for skills all day long, but it's what's going on in that 6 inches between your ears. That's the key.
You got that right. Beautiful. And what an important organization to kind of partner with the fire service and other public safety, right, is that group. So kudos to everyone involved in that. So let's kick off with, I'm sure the podcast listener right now who's got the earbuds in is looking at this and going, what the heck is character-based leadership to start with? So let's start with Scott. How would you define in your own, not textbook, but how would you define character-based leadership? And if somebody had no idea what you're talking about, how do you introduce this to them?
Well, that's a long one, but we'll try and make it a little bit shorter, Juna. Honestly, to me, without the textbook answer, it's about what is about the person, what are the values that they possess that are going to drive whether they're a great firefighter, a great employee, and a great team member versus do they meet the boxes, have the certificates, and can they get signed off through a process of grades? We can do all those things, but do they have trust? Do they have integrity? Do they have empathy? Do they have good social intelligence? Those are the things of character. That's what we want to really try to assess in a better way and foster with our people.
Love it. Yeah, that makes total sense. How about Jamie? Anything to add there?
I don't know. Chief Wilkinson actually hit it out of the park with that one.
But
Yeah, 100%. It's just, you take a look, and I'm probably going to echo probably a little bit of what Ivy talks about, but the values, virtues, and traits of what really makes a good moral human being is pretty much what I think is character.
So true. And where do we ever train about that, right? Until we start talking about this topic, right? There's not very many textbooks out there or school classes that have taught this in the past, right? So I know that's changing. I know we are developing that and we're working towards that, but yeah, it's been a guessing game for many years. Robert, you had a thought there?
Well, my original thought is prompted by Scott's definition is that, I think the first place we really need to start looking is before the people even enter the fire service, and what kind of an assessment tool are we using to bring people on board? Because I think if we assess for those characteristics that we think make good leaders, well, those are good leaders. They should be good leaders from the beginning. I know one of the things that when I was involved, I was the chief of training in our fire and EMS department, and a couple of things that we did during that time to foster this idea that you have to grow leaders right from the very beginning. And to be quite honest with you, we weren't creating anything new. We were stealing the Marine Corps model. And that is, you have to teach leadership from boot camp. And that's where you can really figure out, does this person have those characteristics that are going to make them, number one, a good firefighter, a good team member, someone who's contributing every day. And we did that by organizing our recruits into teams, and then every day somebody in that group was the leader of that group, and it wasn't the same person every day. It was, if depending on the size of the academy, if we had 4 groups of 6, well, then you were rotating leaders every sixth day of training. And
chair's a leader, right? Every seat's
yeah,
a leader.
Yeah, you got to start growing. And the other thing that we did was, in my department, we had the instructors for recruit school, the training academy, came from operations. They were there working on their day off. Well, we upped the game there a little bit and said, we're only going to take company officers as instructors. Okay, because my boss at the time, Jim Graham, who's the deputy chief at the time, said, we have to understand that recruit school training is 50% skills training and 50% leadership. And so, he was one of those people who didn't just talk about things, he put things into action. And that was one of the things that I was responsible for putting into action. And I think it had some really good impact, because you're getting instruction every day, but you're also getting, you're seeing some of the best leadership models in our department anyway, in terms of company officers.
So saying that, how do we take this model and start introducing it early on in the application process? Anybody have any good tips or organizations that have been doing this? Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
Put it into recruitment. Start right with recruitment. So I do class character, attitude, and values before hose lines, halogens, and Hurst tools. And you got to put hose lines, halogens, and Hurst tools in, or nobody will attend a class, right?
Oh, that's
Because
great.
nobody wants to talk about character-based leadership.
Okay.
However, if we go to what Dr. Kimberly Milani said, great quote at the EFO symposium, that kind of closed it out, is that we hire for competence, we fire for character, right? So if we're explaining to them what we expect in character, and it's part of your interview process, part of your onboarding, part of your orientation. And actually, while it's not character, Columbia County, Georgia, and it's not just the fire department, you get evaluated actually on their core values. So their core values spell out pride. So we need to take these character leadership values, attributes that have been developed and utilize them as the recruiting, as the interview questions, and Bob talked about this earlier, and as well as the orientation and then your annual review. Skills and competence we can teach to almost anybody, right? People will do great and do better when they value something, and usually their ability to value doing the right thing comes from their character attributes.
Love that. And I guess that starts at leadership, right? That's what, hopefully the fire chief or the management team is leading that culture shift, right? So for those fire chiefs that are listening right now, that's kind of the first step, right? So
Look at the recruitment posters out there, and I do this when I go to conferences and others. Look at the ones, and when you're recruiting about fighting a fire every day, an extrication once a week, cardiac arrest once a week, right? You get people that are disillusioned when they get on the job, and that's not what they do. So if we're not sending them a realistic message from the time, and even when we go in and do kids' school visits, right? We should be talking to them how character is so important. Whether we're doing reading day or Dr. Seuss reading day, or we're doing other things. Bob, it needs to start with the kids at the young age. So we should have those discussions about character as early on as possible. And it's got to be a concerted effort. And at some point, the major fire service organizations across the world, but at least in North America, have to make character a priority in everything we do.
love that. Love that. And I love how you're looking at the posters right out of the gate, and that tells you a huge key to that organization, right? The culture. Scott, want to add to
Well, I'm
that?
just really following up on what Tony said.
Yeah.
I think those are a couple of great points. I mean, for starters, what are we advertising to people? What are we telling them they're going to be doing? When you go back to the psychology of it, are we suggesting we're getting action-oriented people that don't have people skills because all they're going to do is fight fires, climb ladders, and pull hose lines every day? Where the reality of our modern fire service, and I think in most jurisdictions as well as ours, is it's about working with people. It's about empathy. It's about managing threatening situations. It's all about those character skills more than it is about the muscles and the hauling the ladders. So are we selling ourselves short by convincing, or are we attracting the wrong people for starters? And then to Tony's point, are we really assessing the right characters out the gate? And even before they show up in recruit school, we have to have certain levels of objectivity with our HR processes and everything else. But how do we find a way to embed character and all those key values in the selection process? Because those are the people that are going to perform well, represent our teams well, and honestly have less issues going forward.
And that's where, and that's to me, Scott, that's where the assessment domain of psychology ties in and connects. Because first of all, and I know you had a pretty short off the top of your head list of character, but we don't have a clearly defined set of what are the characteristics that produce a good firefighter. Okay. And I know I talked this to ad nauseum, but back in 1987, the California Post Peace Officers Standards and Training undertook a process to develop the post-assessment standard that's been used for law enforcement since 1987. But they didn't just come up with that. What they did was they talked and pulled together groups from all over California, from fire chiefs to brand new law enforcement officers, etc. And through a lot of that kind of grunt work, they distilled it down to these are the 12 characteristics that we're looking for in people, because this is what the people who are out there have told us. These are the attributes that make a good law enforcement officer. Somebody, you know, who's gonna be successful from day one in the academy. and I think that a great first step in developing a good foundation for character-based leadership in the fire services, we need to get a similar document, a similar tool, okay, so that we know, okay, these are the characteristics that are going to make a good firefighter, because these are firefighters and fire officers who have told us these are the characteristics that will make a successful firefighter. I think then that starts translating into everything that Tony mentioned. Okay, from how what is your recruiting message? Well, if psychology tells you that these are the attributes, these are the characteristics that make for a good firefighter, well then your marketing needs to be focused on those things. You want to be attracting people who have those characteristics. And then as you move into your hiring process, right? You've probably set your organization up for success in that you're going to interview, you're going to assess more people who are going to move on and be hired, because you've really started your hiring process back here when you were determining what do we need to put into our marketing material. And you know, it's not that big a leap really to get from the post standard to a fire service standard. One of our presentations last October at our FSPA conference, well, and I forget which of the presenters it was now, but his take was we don't have to completely retool everything. There are many things there are many characteristics that are common with law enforcement and fire service. Let's spend our time and energy finding out the ones that are unique to the fire service. And you know, people talk to me all the time. They say, "Well, Bob," they say, "What's wrong with using the post standard?" I said, "Well, there's like three things that are wrong. Number one, firefighters and law enforcement are they're animals, but they're completely different animals. Law enforcement officer has the legal authority to take your life. Firefighters, we take an oath to save your life, right? Firefighters are trained from day one how to operate in a team. Law enforcement officers are taught from day one how to be a single resource. Kind of back to the old Texas Rangers motto, one riot, one ranger. Arjuna, you better be ready to pull the hook on me anytime, because when I get on a roll, I'm on a roll. I just don't understand. I just don't understand the reluctance of the fire service to start retooling like this. Even as we continue to say, "Oh, we're having trouble attracting people. We're having trouble recruiting people." Well, that's because what got you here is not going to get you there.
Well, saying that, is there
Well
anyone
said.
out there that has a good example of this already? I'm sure somebody's already done this before. I'm sure somebody's already got a model out there, or a list of values, a list of what character looks like. Anybody have anything to share?
Is
Yeah,
this where I should jump in and talk about Ivy?
Sounds great. And then I'll head over to Tony.
We definitely have to get Ivy to join, because they've done a lot for us to see where we need to go. A couple things that really should be built off of Roberts and what we've discussed about where do we go from here. One, we need research, more research on a regular basis to find out what are those attributes of good character. We think we know what they are. We do have some science, but all all studies need to be replicated and built on, from a good character for a firefighter to being a good fire, fire prevention person, to being a good fire instructor, to being a leader, to look at it at that. Two, the fire service has no programs for future visioning. We have no look for the future type of programs. We live into today and we react just like we do as a fire service. Fire service is a reactionary service. We don't look for predictable ways to and what the future is bringing to us. We don't have research and development, which we should be doing, and that should be part of the human performance part. Human factors, as Jamie spoke about, is where we really need to be spending more time along with character. And finally on this, when we do start selling, we need marketing people and professionals help us marketing our package in the language, not for us, because that's how we market it. We market it for current firefighters and fire chiefs, market it for the people you're trying to connect. And as Superintendent Eric Skablik says, this recruitment issue is not career or volunteer, and it's not just the fire service. So we need to get much smarter and much more intelligent, and it all starts with doing research and have a vision for the future, not a vision for today.
About that. Jamie.
Arjuna, I'd love to just expand on what everyone's been talking about here, because I think the real beauty and the real power of what's going on is that I think there's an opportunity capturing research, capturing development, capturing character, capturing training. If we were to morph or create or expand the training and professional development department within our organizations to include these pieces, I think we would actually see less issues within recruitment and retention issues, from all the way from a probationary firefighter all the way up to a fire service leader. I think there needs to be a lot more development of both personal and professional development within the fire service. Now, that being said, and just putting a little context to what Ivy done, Ivy basically uncovered and found that, amidst the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, back when we went through our first financial recession, they uncovered that it was actually character that was the missing piece as to why organizations were failing, and character was the big reason why some organizations actually survived and actually thrived within that financial recession. So we're going through a real geopolitical issue right now with the Canadians and the Americans. There is real potential for some financial difficulties on both sides of the border, which is going to be impacting all kinds of fire services. So we don't need to go back and really kind of recreate something new. We just need to go back in time and just kind of take a look at what did someone do, aka Ivy, to do that research and uncover what was needed to make sure that there's stability and thriving for organizations now. So what they uncovered was that there was a 3-part of character plus competencies plus commitment. It equals effective leadership. In the fire service, we talk about NFPA standards. We follow NFPA standards to a T, whether that's career combination, volunteer, and I believe forest firefighting as well. And in that case, what we need to do is we just need to drop these competencies as they're related to each rank and role inside the framework. So character plus the competencies plus commitment equals effective leadership. We could begin, especially if we were to introduce this as the junior level officer and bring it in and reintroduce it as they move into the as they move chronologically through their career, moving from a junior firefighter all the way up to, or junior fire officer, all the way up to a fire service leader. We'll begin to see this continuity. We'll begin to see this consistency. We'll begin to see the embedding of these very, very successful research ideas and concepts that have been espoused by Ivy School of Business, and we'll begin to see that morph within the fire service traditions.
For the listener who doesn't know what Ivy is or familiar with that program, can you just give us a little heads up of what the Ivy Business School is?
Yeah, so the Ivy Business School is a business school that comes from the Western University in London, Ontario, Canada. They actually have researchers and professors that are dedicated to focusing on character, especially for their Master's in Business Administration program, their Master's in Public Administration program, and they're beginning to spawn off to create programs that are used in national agencies, whether that's the Canada Revenue Agency, which is equivalent to the IRS within the States, the Canadian Border Services Agency, the RCMP, and it's actually even morphed into our National Department of National Defense. So it's been used on national agencies, and Dr. Mary Crossan has even been able to use this with the Seattle Kraken and the Carolina hurricanes as well. So
I just hope that there's no tariffs against Americans using Ivy. This got to stop.
We'll see about that. We'll see about that. Scott, anything to add about what the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs is doing towards this effort of bringing this to the fire service?
Well, and that's a great question, Arjuna. I think one of the things that everybody's tied it in very well, that the process of where the leadership needs to start and where the character needs to start. And it goes right from pre-hiring through hiring through officer development. And with the CAFC right now, what we've been working on is within our leadership committee is the development of some sort of leadership training resources. This is an area that's been sparse, especially for smaller departments who don't have resources to academia and other educational institutions. So we're going into a 3-part series of programming on leadership, and we're really trying to use as many of these other character attributes as we can within that as we grow this. And the first one is about leading self, which applies to everybody at any level. And as we get through leading self, we're going to be looking on more to leading teams and leading organizations. So really looking to give something back to the fire chiefs and firefighters throughout the country on some level of resources, so they don't have to pull this from a million different places. But the basis of it, is still that character piece.
I love self-leadership as the starting spot, because I think that's truly something that we've missed for so many years, is leading self first. We're always thinking about leading others, and we forget about how to lead ourselves and how to show up authentically.
So Chief George, if we're going to talk about leading self,
please, yeah,
we should discuss emotional intelligence.
Please, yeah.
When I teach classes, anything related to leadership or human interaction, and I ask who knows what emotional intelligence is, hardly anybody raises their hands, and the people that do go, I've heard something about it. So how are we going to be able to teach character if people don't understand who they are and how they react? So however we do this, we need to tie in early on that emotional intelligence and find where the different character attributes fit into the 4 quadrants of that discussion.
Oh, saying that, Tony, how would you describe emotional intelligence for the listener right now I've heard of it, but what the heck is it?
It's very easy. It's understanding yourself and understanding how you interact with others. And understanding yourself is what makes you happy, what makes you sad, what triggers you, and then how do your emotions that you have inside you, how do you present them to others? And then how good are you? I just wrote an article yesterday. I didn't post it because all of you others got more articles, but on social intelligence and the impact connecting in the fire service. So the next part is, how well do you read your room? How well do you understand your people from their perspective? And then how do you actually interact with them to have positive influence? And one of the things in that, when we always talk about influence and negotiation, the goal should be to get the win-win. A lot of times we fight for one side to win, the other side to lose. And that only works in sports where the Philadelphia Eagles are, the Super Bowl champs. And that just had to come out.
That was pretty slick, Tony.
Yeah, you had to slide that one in there.
Right. But it's really simple. The challenge with emotional intelligence, though, is then to actually take that and how do you not only understand yourself, but then how do you modify your behaviors to be more better in your interactions with people, and then you can build in the character attributes that go with each 4 of those quadrants. And I didn't write the book. I don't get any money. The book that I found the best to learn about it is Emotional Intelligence 2.0. It actually has, at the end of each chapter, little practice things you can do to help improve that area. So I promote that all the time. I get no money, no nothing, but it's a great tool.
I'd agree 100%. Great book. Scott, want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I really like what Tony was bringing up about emotional intelligence. Honestly, through the discussions we've had at the CAFC and others, it's probably one of the foundational elements of character that we deal with poorly. When we look at our leaders, our supervisors, our officers, and their ability to manage their staff and to interact properly, that's what's lacking. A lot of our people have never explored this. They don't understand, to Tony's point, what emotional intelligence even is, let alone how they react to other people's emotions. We've got a predominantly male workforce who, as many of our spouses will say, struggle to be in touch with our emotions. But it's true. Like this is where we need to develop our staff and our people to understand that one of the hardest things our supervisors have, and it's difficult, is managing conflict. And that doesn't mean all negativity, but just managing any type of conflict. We tend to be defensive. We tend to not management, and then things escalate and get out of control. So one of those foundational elements of character that's hugely important to leaders and people in supervisory positions is that emotional intelligence. How are you affected by it? How do you feel about when other people say different things? To Tony's point, what are your triggers? And then how do you express your emotions when you're dealing with those people? This is something, again, back to the original, how did we advertise this job? Yeah, we didn't advertise emotional intelligence as a requirement to be a firefighter. We just said, big, strong, pickup ladder, carry hose, good stuff. That's at least when I started. And now we really need to pivot a little bit and start talking about those skills.
Yeah, not the sexy stuff, right? That's 100%. It sounds like that hit a chord there, Jamie. The emotional intelligence and not being able to share our emotions. I think that's a pretty strong thing for us to start learning about, right? And maybe that's something you want to touch on there, Jamie.
Arjuna, like, no matter what organization, industry, or sector it is, everyone's dealing with mental health. If everyone had the opportunity to learn, go through an emotional intelligence skill, have resources like Tony was talking about by Travis Bradbury, or having, emotional intelligence by Daniel Goleman, or even just having YouTube clips or just resources in general, make it part of the curriculum, make it part. I think we would have more understanding, more appreciation for everyone's different emotions, and being able to harness our own emotions when we're in difficult times and we're pressed for situations. So emotional intelligence is absolutely key. Social intelligence is absolutely key. We're talking about competencies that can definitely be put into curriculum.
And beyond the character and the development piece is the fact that same emotional intelligence and self-awareness is one of the things that's important when it comes down to our resilience and our ability to handle stress and manage our mental health, which is a major topic in the fire service. If we have those foundational skills, people are going to be able to use those skills to move through. We're all going to feel the trauma. We're all going to experience things on the street. But if you can use more of a post-traumatic growth approach rather than you're getting beat down and impacted by it, people are going to be way better off.
But I think even more of an area that can have an impact, Scott, is within the organizations, within the department. I mean, when you've got almost 50% of firefighters saying that the biggest source of stress to me is my department, that's an issue, right?
Toxic work environments.
And so, if we don't have, and that I'm quoting that number from Fire Rescue One's annual survey of what firefighters want, and the top of the list on what causes you stress is your department. That's to me, that's like calling in artillery on yourself.
Red flag.
So one of the discussion we should have somewhere in the future is all the things that emotion, being better, having higher level emotional intelligence, having better character attributes and values. What will that improve? What will that make better? And we could do a whole program because Chief Wilkinson hit it. Dealing with emotional intelligence and character will do more to improve mental health in emergency services than critical incident stress debriefing. And I know I'm going to get beat up for that, but that's the truth. You know, as you've all done, I've done some research on that. I built that into the program. But this is, if we want to reduce mental health issues and build resiliency substantially, we're in the right direction. And partnering with the fire service psychology group is something. If you guys seen in our LinkedIn group, I throw things at Dr. Weldon all the time because they're the things we should be talking about, not the bad call. And I want to go off on a little rant. I hate the things, oh, what my eyes have seen, and we are predisposing people coming in. We're telling them that they're going to have bad events because we're not utilizing emotional intelligence and our character to train them properly. I'll be good for now.
Goes back to the classic prevention
I
over
I
reactive.
thought you were pretty good right there, Tony.
No, that's my applause emoji coming up. And the beauty of it is Bob mentions about the in place of the workplace and the people's dissatisfaction with their work environment. This is a lot of stuff that Jamie's worked on. It's the psychological safety beyond the calls and the mental health, emotional intelligence. What is the psychological safety, on the street and more importantly in the workplace? Sorry, I'm teeing you up, Jamie. Go for it.
No, that's okay, Scott. Thank you. It's just really interesting because if we're looking at a foundation, we're looking at a house, we really need to have that foundation in place. And that's psychological safety. We need to create the environment that actually allows people to have that permission for dissenting views, their permission to actually make mistakes and not feel like they're going to be reprimanded or having a huge amount of reprisals for it. People need to feel that they can make errors and actually be human. So then we add that character-based leadership. We're adding the other element to building that house. It's just, we need to start taking a look at the fire service through a different lens. I think in addition to just looking at it through an athletic lens, which will be kind of for another discussion, but in addition to, we really need to start looking at it as what we can do to basically help people not only become better professionals, but better people too. And I think the emotional intelligence, adding in an environment of psychological safety, building in this character-based leadership, whether we start at the bottom of probationary firefighter, we start at junior officer, or we start right up at the fire chief level, it will really make a profound difference in the mental behavioral health issues we are witnessing across all industries, North America wide.
So Jamie usually goes on about Ford. I should subject you that the Grateful Dead will, and using analogies from there and their business principles will also be a different, and I'm a little fun, but the goal is we need to look at the fire service from outside the fire service, how other industries have morphed. And that used to be a big discussion in leadership in the 80s and 90s, and we kind of got away from it, and we're always looking internally, and our partners in improvement should definitely be other industries, whether it's music or automaking or wherever we come from, to give us some different perspective. I think it requires our brains to think differently and be more open to other opportunities.
And on that note, I mean, this might be a little bit of a stretch, but the U.S. military has skunk works to develop and do very experimental training, but they have provided aircraft that have actually basically helped save and keep everyone safe because they've built, the U-2 spy plane, and that's morphed now into the F-117 stealth aircraft, as well as the B-2 bombers and the B-1B. But it came out of the skunk works. It came out of the organization that's basically been on the side, a little bit of a branch of the military, but are always trying something new, pushing the boundaries, testing things out. And maybe the fire service needs something like that. Maybe this is where the character-based leadership comes in, where we're actually testing things, testing our boundaries, trying things out in experimental fashion, just to see what works, what doesn't work.
We're starting the conversation here. I think that's first step. And then, let's start building on that, Jamie, 100%. Sorry, go ahead, Tony.
I was going to say, and that's going beyond just nozzles, right? We got to get beyond innovation is just equipment. It is we got to definitely, our most valuable resource is our human resources. And they're the ones that operate all of those tools and appliances that we have out there, right? So instead of looking for the next greatest nozzle or SCBA or thermal imaging camera, which are all important, let's start developing, as Jamie talked about, people through various different resources, and then let's take human factors. What tools can we create that best works with the human body to improve performance in firefighting? So I just saw Boston, what's a Boston Instruments or whatever they're called. They make the robots. The robot I saw today is going to challenge firefighters. It is going to challenge. It can flip, it can turn, it can cross its legs. All it needs to have some AI enough to make some decisions as it's crawling down a hallway.
I saw those. Well, mind blowing how well they can move. So I'm pretty interested in the concept of character-based leadership and how it starts in the recruit level. Do you think there's any changes as you move through the ranks that your character and your values and everything like that shift as you become a leader, or do you say it's pretty consistent from day one right to the end? Scott?
Well, realistically, your experiences, your wisdom, your abilities, your knowledge are going to change. Your character is your character, and we can work to develop it. But those key attributes of what we need from people, be it the integrity, the trust, the compassion, the empathy, the social and emotional intelligence, those are things we have to look for before we hire people. They have to develop them as recruits, and we continue to develop them. But I don't think they really change, other than we can do better and become more aware as we go forward. And the more we can improve and become aware of those and use those skills, the better we're going to be as leaders as we develop people. You know, we've got a very hierarchical system historically with seniority and different aspects, but it's those attributes that we need to focus on when we start putting people into specialty positions, leadership positions. And I think the more we can develop them, the core is still the same though.
I think that there's great potential for those characteristics to become better as somebody's moving along. Okay, face it, when we're hiring somebody who's 21, 22 years old, right? How much experience have they had in being empathetic, in having to trust somebody that they just met? Okay, so I think that as a person progresses in their fire service career, if they're working in an environment that is congruent with that, right? Their sense of empathy can only get better. Their sense of integrity only gets better when they see other people making good decisions and doing the right thing under impossible circumstances. I think that's what keeps someone on the upward channels as they move through their career. But by the same token, you know, if you hire a good person and you got a sick organization, sooner or later that individual is going to get sick.
Well, and I think you nailed it, Bob, is the issue is we've all said you need it at the front end, but you also need the leadership to lead by example and fostering that growth, fostering the importance of those values. Because if they're not, if your officer or your leadership, if you don't have the psychological safety that Jamie mentioned, and you don't have the leadership that says, you know, this is the most important thing, your empathy, your ability to interact with others, the way you treat people, essentially, then you're right. They're gonna lose that. We see attitudes change depending on the environment. So it's not only at the recruit level where we have to look at it, but we have to embed this throughout the entire organization.
And I think another piece there too is, I think if we can give people an opportunity to have more connection with the leaders in their organizations, right? To have those discussions, particularly after a fire chief perhaps has had to make a difficult decision or whatever, to have the ability to talk to their people and say, this was the thought process that led to that decision. Okay, now I'm sure there will be people who will talk like they know what was going on, but this is what was happening, and this is why I made that decision. I think that if more organizations could do that down through the ranks, okay. You know, I had the great fortune of working for many bosses who that's how they worked. You know, they didn't necessarily come out and say, "Hey, you want to know how I made that?" But you know, being somewhat inquisitive, I would ask, and they would explain, and I would say, you know, that sure helped me. But I bet there's about 5 or 6 other company officers in this battalion that could benefit from having this same conversation.
I think vulnerability and authenticity is essentially a superpower for any leader. So if they can be vulnerable, open, honest, authentic, to me, that is what I would look for in a leader in a heartbeat.
And those are those advanced leadership, those the advanced character leadership traits that you mentioned, Arjuna. Those are so important. They're important at all levels, but as you grow in a leader, you know, and you go back to what Bob said about organizations and the concerns that firefighters had, and Jamie's discussions about psychological safety, those attributes make those changes.
And you know,
However,
leaders in fire departments have more tools available to them today to talk right to their firefighters and officers. You know, we complain all the time about all they do is have their phone in their nose. Well, how about putting some good shit in front of their nose?
So what we should really clarify, the attributes and values really shouldn't change much, but through experience and time going up the ladder, the skill sets are different. Being a good firefighter does not make you a good officer. And there was a post on social media yesterday that somebody shouldn't become an officer or a chief of an organization if they haven't gone through the ranks. I'll give you an operational officer, yes, should have to go through the ranks. But a CEO, as we see in corporations all across the world, do not need to be firefighters. It is a totally different set of skill sets that we use to discipline and possibly even fire somebody to learn how to work on a team, and understanding how to mete out fairness to everybody is a whole different process. So we should, what we've done in Burlington County during COVID and we're using for our fire department, is create a professional development roadmap. So if you want to talk about how we build character in, you put it in your professional development roadmap, and at each level you discuss. And now this is all creating more work for me as I think about it, but we discuss, what does a training officer, how does he use his emotional intelligence, his values and character attributes? How's fire prevention use them? How does the next officer up use them with their new set of skill sets?
About that. I want to pivot slightly. This is a question that's kind of, you know, always resting in my mind. How do we introduce character-based leadership into organizations that are very seniority-based, and the fire service is very seniority-based? That is probably the biggest roadblock that I can see in making this an organizational North American fire service wide. Any thoughts on how we can move through that? Jamie?
Yeah,
Go for it, Jamie.
I can try that one. I think for really, when character-based leadership was actually originally created, it was created more for leadership. And I think we really need to start there to determine the buy-in, to determine the viability, because as research has proven that if people are not really kind of looking to the leadership as they're kind of modeling what they're kind of really should be espousing, then it's very difficult to get the buy-in from the bottom. And we can always try putting it at the bottom and working its way up through a seniority base. But there's a very high propensity that there can be people up there within the ranks that actually have their own ulterior motives that might not prevent things from moving forward. So I think we really need to work at the leadership level, the fire service leadership level, try it out. And that being said, it will actually be a smaller cohort that actually would be trying it out, testing it out, and then introducing it into little spurts down through the ranks.
Like that. Thank you. Scott?
Yeah, I mean, further to what Jamie said, I come from we're in a very seniority-based organization, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive. yes, I mean, we can't necessarily just pick people strictly for those character attributes, but we can do, in our service, we're currently working on developing and implementing a leadership educational program that's focused on those character attributes that starts throughout the whole organization. But we're similar to what Jamie said, we're actually starting I'll call it the pilot, but we're starting to hit those operational leaders, our battalion chiefs, or our district chiefs, our platoon chiefs, the people that are actually leading by example within those groups on the street, because they're having a biggest impacts. And if we can educate, we're not going to turn seniority on its head, and nor do we necessarily need to, but we need to educate, bring awareness, and provide those resources to those groups of people. And even if we don't get to them all, we may not get to, but every person that starts to understand character, leadership, empathy, how to resolve conflict, how to manage people in a better way, is going to have an impact, and that's going to trickle down.
I love that. Yeah, they can be in sync, right? They don't have to be opposing. They can be in sync, right? So I love that.
I think you do two different ways. You do it organizationally, and as we're talking about now is globally, in North America, have the major fire service organizations promote it so that information is more readily getting out. Change the NFPA, and we all miss, because I think they just finished the Officer 1021 updates, is getting character-based leadership and you know emotional intelligence. Well, I was told that emotional intelligence being discussed is to get that stuff built in there. We probably have enough of valid research to have it start being part of that. So I think there's multiple ways, but looking at having worked in seniority-based organizations, I thought about it. I became a chief in an organization in another state by being hired, and I was passed over all the seniority people. And when I came back to New Jersey, all the seniority people were passed over, and I was provided that position. So, I got to believe I had a half a character attribute somewhere that somebody believed in me.
I betcha. I betcha.
Well, I know at least one or two people on that 1020 committee you mentioned, so I think we can talk about it, and
Okay.
coming up for the next iteration of the standard.
Right.
I think we're going to that's going to have to be our focus, is character leadership.
So saying that, Scott, what would be your number one resource for the listener right now to learn a little bit about more, like expand this conversation on their own time, learn their own self-development? Where would you direct a listener right now to go read something or listen to something? What would be your go-to?
I think the biggest thing, I mean, there's a billion things out on the internet, but a lot of our people tend to just go to whatever the shiny toy on the internet. It's easy, it's fun, it's whatever drops it. But let's go to the academia, let's go to the decent research, let's go to the Ivies, let's go to the Harvard Business Schools, let's go to those sources and see what they're telling us. But and beyond that, it's not just about fire service leadership, like we heard earlier, and I think was a great point. Let's look outside the fire service. A lot of this stuff is not fire service specific. It's about people, characters, and how we treat each other. And that information is out there across a lot of places, from psychology to human development. There's books up the wazoo from everybody from your Simon Sinek's to across the board. There's so many resources. I don't even know where to start with a specific one, but stick to the good stuff and the academia.
Love it. Love it. How about you, Jamie? What would be your go-to resource to share?
Oh my goodness.
You got a gazillion of them, I'm sure.
Yeah. So American Icon about Alan Mullally. It's Your Ship. Best management techniques from the best damn ship in the Navy. Captain D. Michael Abrashoff. All the research and the articles on character-based leadership put out by Ivy School of Business. Wow. Gallup Press has put out some fantastic stuff on well-being and strengths-based leadership and stuff like that. Just to echo what Chief Wilkinson was talking about, is that if we begin to start looking outside the organization, bringing in resources, because I think there's some fabulous publications on how to become a good chief, how to do good operations within the organization, but do they also talk about what are the best ways to become better people? And I think by looking outside the industry, beginning to morph some of our traditions with that, I think we'll become really that hybrid type of professional, personal personal athlete, for industrial athlete, if you will, tactical athlete for the communities.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, great book recommendations there. Love those. How about you, Tony? What would be your go-to resource to share?
Off the top of my head would be the one that I look at all the time is Ivy. And of course, that other esteemed group, the LinkedIn Character-Based Leadership Group. I think, we probably actually should create not just our group, but we should actually create a page or whatever they are called on LinkedIn so we can engage more people instead of the 30 or 40 of us that are behind the scenes. And I mean that seriously. So, because what I've heard really where the core is Ivy has most of it and Steve Virgin. So we need to be out in the public eye more using social media, find out somebody who's good with TikTok, although that may go away on August 15th, but fine. Well, for us anyway, not for you, you know. Don't,
Yeah, I think that's April.
I got
isn't
to
it?
get my
Yeah.
passport renewed so I can come up and spend some time in Canada and be able to smile. But we really need to get out on social media and other engagements. And at least Jamie and Dr. Milani have made it to the EFO symposium, and a few others. But we need to really get out there, social media, and utilize existing resources to share that message.
Yeah, that LinkedIn group that, well, I'm part of that as well. And it's a wealth of knowledge but it's also, like you said, 30, 40 people, that's it, right? So maybe we need to share that with the world a bit more. So excellent. How about you, Robert? What's a resource you'd love to share with the listener today?
I'll tell you what, I'm having trouble with my post flu mindset here. I tell you, hey, I would tell somebody, go back and read anything and everything you can find on Chief Brunacini.
Yes. Yep.
Bruno was nailing this stuff back in the 1980s.
Can't go wrong there.
From the whole, that whole aspect of customer service in the fire service, and when you look at what he was describing and what he was talking about, that was character-based leadership, and to have people out there on the street who can deliver that kind of customer service, that tells you what should you be looking for in those people that you're trying to attract to the fire service, that you're trying to get a part of. I know, we talk an awful lot about when it comes to recruitment, that we focus so much on the physical aspects of it, right? We got CPAT and all of that sort of thing. But what are we even looking in the right places for the right people? Okay. I come to think of these when you're looking at firefighters and people who have applied for your positions, I think it'd be very fruitful to look back at what have these people done so far in the area of service to others. What groups have they belonged to when they were in high school? What kind of community involvement have they had before they ever came to your front door? Because those are the people that I think have the ability to bring the kind of character to the job that then as Scott says, then we can train them how to be a firefighter.
Well, like you said, Bob, before about, Bruno boiled down. He did character leadership before we talked about character leadership. It's serving Mrs. Smith, be nice. And it's not just about serving others. I think the key thing is serving each other. We want to serve the community as others, but how are we treating ourselves? How are we treating our subordinates and our colleagues? And going back to the psychological safety, how are we interacting as people? Number one.
So as we wrap up this amazing conversation, I'm sure we could do this for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. Maybe it'll warrant a part 2. I just want to close off with maybe just sharing a little bit of what your leadership North Star is. So when you're going through challenging times, whatever you're going through in your life, what value or belief do you lean to realign yourself, get yourself back in order? And that's part of that self-leadership. So Jamie, what would be your go-to value to bring you back to your North Star?
You know, it's funny, but I think we talked about this in our first episode. You know, Robin Sharma was huge for talking about communing with nature. And I just think it's such a brilliant idea and a brilliant concept that if we're really stuck in a problem, we need to remove ourselves from the noise. We need to recharge our batteries. We need to get into nature. And I think that has the biggest ability to actually clear our minds, have creativity, and really truly solve our problems that we're actually facing in our organizations and our personal worlds.
Love that. Yep. And I remember water was a big thing for you as well. Yeah.
Water was huge. Yes.
Yeah.
I like mine frozen.
You like the frozen water?
I like the frozen water.
Yeah.
How about you, Scott? What would be your North Star?
Well, you know, I like Jamie's as far as resetting yourself or resetting myself to continue to work and make decisions. But when it, you know, a lot of times it's conflicting issues. There's, you know, you're trying to create a path as a leader, and there's everything from financial to human people to resources to people. Well, there's always different factions that want this, want that. I try as much as possible to come back to the integrity of it and say, just what's the right thing to do? You know, just do it the right thing for the right reasons. Try to get rid of the noise and say, center yourself on essentially, hopefully you were raised with that, but you know, what's the right thing to do for the people and to serve the citizens? Take away the noise, and maybe the nature is a good way to take away some of that noise.
I would add the right thing for yourself as well, right? Not just
100%.
others. Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Robert? What would be your North Star? And you got lots of stars in your image there. So what's your go-to?
Yeah. Yeah. My North Star is always mom.
Sorry, mom?
What would my
Yeah.
mom think about this?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Would if what I did or what I'm doing, would that make her proud? My mom pretty much by herself raised 4 boys. I was the oldest of 4. And you know, I can count on one hand the number of times that my mom smacked me on the butt. The rest of the time it was the look, it was the tone of her voice that let me know that, you know, either A, she was proud of what I had done, or B, I think you can do better. And you know, I always told her before she decided she would rather be cremated than buried, I said, your tombstone should always say, I raised 4 boys and not one of them ever spent a night in jail.
That's impressive. Yes. Yeah, I think Brunacini even said something about that, right? Do you want to see your story written on the paper the next morning, right? So how about you, Tony? What would be your North Star?
So I got to go along with Chief Wilkinson, Jamie. I have a lake right out there. I do my live on the lake thing at least once a week. But what it is about my lake and how it helps me refocus is, and a little story. So I do leadership stuff. I'm doing this today. And my wife will go, well, you talk all this leadership stuff. How about living at home? So what I really need to do when I go out and have that refresh and refocus is get humility to really look at myself to see, am I being who I say I am and what I'm pontificating to others. So I spend a lot more time in humility than I ever did in the last 5 or 6 years, because in the fire service, we're not raised on humility, right? And in the fire station, what do? We challenge each other and we cut each other down, and it's in fun, but we never give our true selves, right? So we're always fighting to put on that shield that, you know, we're really tough and we're not going to admit to any wrongdoing. So I use humility to really get a regain and refocus of who I am. Am I really being true to myself and to others?
And you get the award for best use of a 50-cent word with that pontificating.
Oh no, well, that goes right back to what Rico was back to what you said, Arjuna, is about, you know, like full circle here, humility, vulnerability, and that's some of those key character traits that we need all the way through, and especially as leaders.
100%. Like I said, we could probably talk about this for hours. I really appreciate everyone's time and knowledge, because you are all experts in this field, and thank you for sharing it with our fire service community and the listeners on the Beneath the Helmet podcast. For the listeners listening right now, hopefully you got a little nugget to kind of spark some interest on what character-based leadership is, and maybe got some resources now you can look into and share this with your network and get more people talking about character-based leadership, because I think this is the start of a new movement in the fire service. It's been going for years, but it's going to be, getting some momentum now. So thank you, everyone. Much appreciated. Until next time, stay well. That's a wrap, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Arjuna. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Happy trails.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.